Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the most unusual Ark creatures, so let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Astrocetus, and this is one of those creatures which on the surface may not seem that unusual, but I really can't think of any other game which has a creature like the Astrocetus. And also, this was a very new thing to Ark as well. No space things had been done in Ark, and the fact that with Gen 1 we had a space biome, and then we had this hunking beast of a creature, it is definitely an unusual Ark tame, as in it isn't like most of the other creatures in Ark. And there are only a couple of creatures which I can think of which are as unusual as this thing, and also at the same time follow the similar genre that this thing has of being a sea creature of sorts. The Astrod Delphus obviously being a great example there, that meaning space dolphin instead of space whale, which is what Astrocetus means. Speaking of the Astrod Delphus, next up is the Astrod Delphus, and the only reason why I would say this is a little bit more unusual than the Astrocetus is its design is more unusual, and also its abilities are a lot more unusual than the Astrocetus. The Astrod Delphus is essentially like a dart plane. This thing can just soar through the air and do so many acrobatics and shoot loads of lasers, and yes, it has technically been done before, but you wouldn't really expect it out of this creature, and its design and overall feel is very unusual, and I can't think of any Ark creature other than the Astrod Delphus, of course, which controls like the Astrod Delphus. And also, again, with the Astrocetus and Astrod Delphus, it doesn't really make sense that they work outside of space, but they kind of have to. You know, it is the game of Ark, and there are many other maps, and there are many other biomes that aren't space biomes. So yeah, it just kind of breaks the immersion for me there. But you know, it's Ark, they're fantasy creatures. Who knows, maybe they can just dart around in non-space as well. Although they do make a lot more sense in space biomes. But obviously, for most of the time which you'll be using these things, you won't be using them in space biomes. You'll be using them to travel across the map, as both of them are great traveling mounts. The Astrod Delphus being better for traveling, obviously, as it is a significantly faster creature, and also it's just a lot more fun to ride around on. Next up, we have the Buldoog, and this is strangely one of the cutest yet horrifying creatures that Ark has to offer, and obviously it debuted with Arboration, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't appeared in any other map since, but be sure to correct me if I did get that wrong. And in terms of this thing's abilities, it is just a light pet like the Shinehorn and the Featherlight, which essentially will debuff things like Reapers and the Nameless. Not really useful on any other map, but they're definitely really cute, and the fact that there is a mask for the Buldoog, and you kind of put the Noglin in the same spot here as they are similar creatures, they definitely are respected, but very unusual tames. Now, I don't know what it is, but the Manag always seems really weird to me, and the Manag just seems like a creature which doesn't seem like any other Ark creature which I can think of in any way, shape or form. This is essentially like a Ferox type thing with ice fists that can jump into the air and has some sort of elemental power, and that also has ice breath and can freeze creatures. This is definitely an oddity and an unusual tame which hasn't been revisited since. There is no other Ark creature to this day which is like the Manag, and also the spelling for it is pretty unusual as well, but once you learn how to spell it once, you kind of don't forget it, as its name is that unusual. And it definitely is an extremely useful creature. Obviously, as you can see, it can travel across the map with insane speeds, and it deals a pretty reasonable amount of damage as well, which you can't get out of every great traveling mount. But the Manag definitely is great for that, and like I said as well, it is great at freezing creatures, and in a moment you will see what it is like when it does freeze creatures. The only thing you really have to watch out for though is this thing is extremely buggy and will get stuck on things, and it just did get stuck on something there. In terms of it freezing, it will freeze creatures for a very, very long amount of time, which is why it is heavily used by PvP griefers. I've heard not as much anymore since they got nerfed, but they still get used a little bit in terms of PvP griefing still to this day. Now, the Rock Drake is pretty similar to the Manag in a lot of things, but I think it is slightly more unusual, partly because it did come first. Obviously, Arboration was the map that came up before Extinction, and also just the way that this creature is formed is a little bit more unusual. This is kind of like a somewhat T-Rexy chicken I don't really know where those two creatures came from. But I would just call it kind of a T-Rexy, chickeny, turkey thing. Again, I don't really know where I'm going with that. It is so unusual in the form that it is. You can't really relate it to other creatures, which is very, very weird, and definitely a sign which it is very unusual. But its taming method isn't particularly one of the most unusual, like you would expect from this creature. It is the exact same as the wyvern. You simply steal the egg from the rock drake nest, and then boom, once you've obviously incubated and raised up that creature, you have yourself a rock drake. And also they do come in a lot of colours as well, this pink being an example, which is actually quite weird for a lot of Ark creatures, as most creatures do follow a similar colour pattern, whereas the rock drake has a wealth of colours. And I actually kind of really like the tealy blue more than the colour which I've got here. I like a tealy blue, like a bluey green is what I kind of like on a wyvern. Not a wyvern, this is a rock drake. Why am I talking about wyverns? In terms of rock drake colour, that is my preference. What is your rock drake colour? Comment in the comments down below. Don't know why I said comment too many times in the sentence. But comment in the comments down below. What is your favourite rock drake colour? As I'd really like to know. Mine is definitely that kind of like bluey, greeny thing. But you know, some of you may be digging this pink and purple, which we got here. No, it's not pink and purple. Pink and blue. I may be slightly colourblind. In at number 5 is the Gasbags, and this is just a creature which is such an oddity. And also, I'm seriously questioning a wildcard here. How did they come up with the idea for this? Or did we come up with the idea for this? Honestly, I don't know, but somehow this thing was created, and it's been in the game since extinction, and I don't really get how it came around or how the idea came for it. It's literally a farting gas animal which flies on its own gas. It's a very, very weird premise, but actually a very cool creature which doesn't require a saddle. The saddle's only there if you have friends, unlike me, because I don't really have friends I play Ark with, or friends in general, you know, living that life. But that saddle is there if you do have friends, unlike any YouTuber which you can really think of. Us YouTubers, yeah, we don't really get the friends. This is why we do YouTube, you know. But if you do have friends, then your friend can go on the saddle, and then you can travel together, which is nice, you know. The Diplodocus has a significantly higher passenger count, but that's not on the list because that isn't a very interesting or unusual creature. Anyway, I should stop talking about the Diplodocus. What's actually good about the Gasbags? Well, on extinction, this is actually one of the best creatures out there for gathering metal. Obviously, still the RG, and the Gasbags is significantly harder to control than the RG, but it is a lot cuter. And it's just, I like using the creatures which came on that map. And I'll always try to use the Gasbags, as long as I can control it at the time, to do some metal runs. And once you learn it, it's a really, really great creature for doing those metal runs. If you don't just get stuck in a trench with loads of wyverns and get killed a couple of times. That happened because I forgot to enable creative mode, stupidly, for this B-roll. But, you know, editing, it looks like I did nothing wrong and I escaped perfectly. But there was multiple attempts in this, and then I flew too high, and I got up caught into the world border. I am definitely not a great pilot of the Gasbags. Also, if you find yourself like this, make sure to dismount just before you hit the ground. It will save you. Now, the Rhino Gatha, I think, came from us. It was from some kind of creature voting thing anyway, and we did vote for this creature to be in the game, and it is one of the more unusual ones. There isn't any other Ark creature which is really like this thing. And also, I know loads of people are saying Rhino Gathas are rare, and I get that they're rare. On ASA at the moment, I've seen about 5 Rhino Gathas in the swamp biome. Is there an overspawn of Rhino Gathas on ASA? Wildcard, can you tell me please, if you're watching this video, because I've had way too many encounters with this thing. I've seen 1 Giga, and I've seen 5 Rhino Gathas, and these things are generally a lot rarer than a Giga, as they only spawn in one specific biome, whereas Gigas can spawn on several places around the map. In terms of the Rhino Gatha's uses though, this thing is essentially just an upgraded Quetz, which is a lot faster and deals more damage. As unlike a Quetz, it will deal more damage. It is significantly harder to tame and uses the taming method, which the Reaper has, which I'll talk about because the Reaper is ahead on this list. Oh my god, spoilers. But either way, the Reaper is ahead on this list, so I'll talk about its taming method similarly there. But you can always check out my Rhino Gatha taming guide if you want to know fully, in detail, how to tame this thing. And you'll see brief b-roll of me actually taming it, because this is from the guide video. I was just a little bit lazy at the time, and I was just like, I'll take my guide video and then I'll just chuck that into b-roll, which is obviously why you're seeing me tame it here, and you're not seeing me tame every other Ark creature in all of the other b-rolls. But it is a very long and arduous taming process, which is extremely difficult and requires 2 Rhino Gathas, not 1. You're going to need 2 of those things, and you're going to need a pheromone, you're going to need to kill 1, and then yeah, there's so much. Just check out the tutorial. I really shouldn't talk about it more. The Rhino Gatha is just one of those creatures which is really unusual, and we voted for, and for some reason spawns way too much on ASA. Have no idea why, but it does. This is the Rhino Gatha. It's one of Ark's most unusual tames. The spoiler is here, with the Reaper being in at number 3, and the Reaper is a even more unusual tame than the Rhino Gatha, as obviously it came way before. The Rhino Gatha is the most recent creature which has been added to Ark, apart from the Astrocetus. Don't know if that is in ASA at the moment, but I'm going to count that as the most recent Ark creature. Is that thing coming to Scorched Earth or the island? Either way, it might not be here yet, so don't take my word on that one. Not quite sure. That may be a Scorched Earth creature. Actually, thinking about it, that is a Scorched Earth creature. The Rhino Gatha was the one for the island. Yes, the Rhino Gatha is the latest creature of Ark at the moment. And the Reaper has obviously been in Ark for ages. It came out in Operation. That was way back in 2017. And this thing was such an oddity at the time, but it really fits into that map, and its taming method is one of the most unusual in the game. Essentially what you do is you'll get a Reaper Queen to a really low amount of health. You can use a trap for this, it'll make it so much easier, and you can use light pets as well. Not for the other bit of the taming method though, as that won't work with a light pet. You can't have a light pet when this thing impregnates you when you go up to it after you put its health down. At least I'm pretty sure you can't. Don't anyway, as it may somewhat fail, as the Reapers really do not like light pets. But after you have been impregnated by the Reaper, obviously after you damaged it and the impregnation has occurred, you just get a ton of XP, and then boom, you have yourself a Reaper. In at number 2 is the Blood Stalker, and this is just essentially a spider with, I don't think 8 eyes, but it may have 8 eyes, or it may have 12. Honestly, comment down below how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as right now I don't know. I'm sure I could look up an image, but I know one of you out there knows the answer to this. Well, obviously you can tell why the Bloodstalker is so unusual. No other Ark creature is really like this, and you could say the Aranio is another kind of spidery thing, but that is just kind of like a normal spider. The Bloodstalker is like a vampire, blood-sucking Spider-Man thing with an obscene amount of eyes. It may be 8, it may be 12, I'm not quite sure. Make sure to let me know. I want to know how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as I'm really not sure, as I have not seen one up close and personal for a while. But also, this thing's taming method is very much an oddity. Like no other Ark creature, apart from the Desmodus, obviously, off the top of my head, which I can think of, has the same taming method. You essentially get blood bags, which you will need to syringe out of your body, or you can obviously use the Desmodus to harvest them now, but originally you just had to use the blood syringe to get those, and then it will just eat those, and then you'll tame yourself a Bloodstalker, and you can feed it some creatures before to get 100% effectiveness. But honestly, I've never bothered with that, as I'm not going to do like insane things with this creature. Like, I'm not going to fight bosses with the Bloodstalker. I just want a good one. And obviously for missions, you're not even going to need a Bloodstalker, but it is good to get one, obviously, so you can get to those missions, so you can get all of those hexagons. But before you get a Bloodstalker, you should definitely go to the Bogrish missions to practice. And finally, in at number 1 is the Vonaur. And the reason why I have put this thing in at number 1 isn't because it has the weirdest taming method or anything along those lines. It is just, there has never been any kind of creature like the Vonaur apart from the Vonaur. I can think of no other Ark creature like this tame. And albeit, yes, it does have one of the simplest taming methods out of all of the creatures on the list. It is just a very simple knockout tame. No other Ark creature compares to this thing in terms of what it is. This thing, again, is just a moving turret, and there's no other creature which does this like the Vonaur. And sadly, the damage of the turrets doesn't scale with melee, but obviously you can keep leveling up that stamina to shoot even more turrets out. And obviously I wouldn't recommend it in this close of a proximity, but it is definitely an extremely useful thing, which when you ride this thing you will use a lot. But it also does have your general just attack, hack and slash, and it also can shake spines off of it as well. And also, I think when you look at it head on when it's shooting turrets, it's a little bit creepy. That animation just to me is a little bit on the creepy side. The 10 most reliable Ark Tames. In at number 10 is the Ther, and you can always rely on a really good Ther to make your day even better, and it is an extremely reliable creature as it is very easy to control, very easy to use, and it will always do the job that you want it to do, unless you're fighting bosses, obviously, as the Ther is not allowed in boss arenas, which kind of does make sense. This is a really OP creature capable of so many things, but the fact that the Deinonychus is allowed in boss arenas is a kind of a bit of a shame, really, that the Ther isn't as well, as they are pretty similar creatures when you think about it. And the Ther is definitely a reliable one, and one which is very easy to tame as well, albeit not spawning in the nicest of Ark biomes, being in the Redwoods biome, which isn't a very kind place. But compared to some other biomes that you'll find in Ark, like the swamp even on the islands, the Redwoods is a much friendlier place. And the fact that this is a simple knockout tame, and it really isn't a difficult to figure out tame, or really a difficult tame, especially with the net gun. Obviously you don't have that on ASA, but on ASC you do, and even with a basic trap as well. They are really simple tames, really easy to tame. The only thing you have to avoid is just them pouncing on you when they're in the trees, but if you take the right precautions, these things are really easy to tame, and I can't stress that enough. And also on top of that, their saddle level isn't too high as well. They're really quick, they're really agile, they're really mobile, they can climb so many surfaces, which makes them really great reliable travel mounts. They have a great weight stat as well, which is another really useful thing for even something like a carnivore to have, especially one of this size, as you will be lugging around some gear or resources or whatever you are actually going to be lugging around or using this creature for in general. And obviously through all of that, they will still give you all of that necessary damage which you require. The Ther is honestly an insanely great tame, one of which you should tame as soon as you can. Next up, we have the Ther, and the Ther is one of the best creatures you will find out there in Ark. Nothing can really compare to the Tickle Chicken's reliability in terms of all of its harvesting and its gathering. This creature is just so useful for so many things. The fact that it can gather loads of fiber is an absolute godsend. The fact that it can gather loads of wood and thatch and berries and loads of meat as well, as it is great at dealing loads and loads of damage. But what would you really expect from those absolutely massive claws of which it yields? The Ther is an insanely great creature for so many things, and it is reliable for everything. It is easy to control, easy to tame, albeit its taming does take a little bit longer compared to some other tames, and you wouldn't expect it to take that long for its size, but it is mainly because it is a herbivore, and herbivore tames do generally take a little bit longer. Obviously, unless you have vegetables or kibble, then it'll be pretty much the same as the carnivore tames. And also its saddle is unlocked at level 69 too, which is just a nice little bonus.
Nice.
And also on top of all of that as well, the Ther is great for killing the dragon on the island, as it is a herbivore, and the dragon's fire ability deals an obscene amount of damage to carnivores, so the Ther is pretty much your best friend when it comes to that boss fight. Right, next on the list we have the UT, and the UT is one of those creatures which I will always need for any boss fight that I may be doing, unless it's the Moda, as this thing really doesn't go underwater very well. But that is not what you're going to be using this thing for. You're going to be using this to be that creature that you ride on, especially on single player when you're doing the bosses. You send your fighting creatures in, you keep the Daedon by your side, and you just use those incredible rules that it has, and it will work every time, and it is so easy. No matter your Ark skill level, the UT will be a really reliable creature for you. There is no way which you can get the UT wrong. You simply just have to press a button and it does a thing, and then 30 seconds later you press that button again and it keeps doing that thing, and your creatures are going to be even stronger, and in some cases, if you use the Fear Roar as well, it will debuff the enemy creatures, even though that doesn't really apply for bosses as they are creatures of great size and there is a size limit on what the Fear Roar applies to, but still a very useful thing in just general combat around the Ark map as well, especially for creatures which are smaller than the UT, which I think is around the size limit, and definitely for PvP raiders on Pteranodons. But just before we continue, make sure to hit that like button and the subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. Now, the Anki is obviously one of the most useful creatures that you will encounter in Ark, and it is by far the most reliable way to get all of that necessary metal, which is by far one of the most important resources, if not the most important resource in Ark. You're going to use that thing so much for tools, weapons, armor, structures, saddles, you name it. Metal is going to be used, and you need to gather that metal in some way. And obviously you can always use the metal pick and the metal hatchet, but the Anki is going to gather even more metal every single time with the exact same reliability every time, so you always know what to expect when gathering metal with this thing, and it is just so nice to use and so easy to use that, again, like the UT, you can't get this wrong. You press a button and then boom, absolute insane amounts of metal. And you can definitely put the Dodic in this position as well, as both of those creatures are really reliable, easy ways to get resources quick, fast and easily, and definitely creatures which you will need to use at some point, especially if you're playing solo, to get all of that progress done quickly and efficiently, and these things are definitely going to help you out on that Ark grind. Now, the Baselo is a creature which is probably the best ocean tame in Ark. There is nothing to me which really does compare to this creature in terms of its uses and reliability. This is the best creature out there for doing any kind of underwater caves, although it does have a depth limit, which is a little bit sad, but it kind of does make sense, and it adds an essence of realism to this creature as well. But the reason why it is so reliable in the ocean is mainly because of one ability which it has, which pretty much no other Ark creature has even to this day, but the Astrocetus will have that ability. And actually, I don't even know if it's in the game at the moment. I think it is. It might be on ASA the Island. I'm not really sure, and I haven't tamed one of those yet. And the Baselo is available to all Ark players, so that is why it is on this list. It is immune to eels and jellyfish and all of those kind of creatures, which is an absolute godsend when it comes to Ark, as they are the most pesky creatures in the ocean, and there's really no way to get around them, apart from when you have that legendary Baselo, as you can simply just swim past them and they can't do anything to you. So relaxing. In at number 5 is the Barry, and this is by far the best creature out there for doing any kind of cave runs, and especially on ASA at the moment, as the island is the only real available map to the general public at the moment. Obviously Spartel Farm is there as well, but that is a little bit of a janky thing to get through, and I'll not talk about it again in this video as it is not really relevant. In terms of the Barry's abilities, like I've said, this is the best caving creature out there because of its size. It is just so good at getting into caves, and it is so reliable, as every time it will get into that cave and it will do the job you need it to do, which is to get you to that cave artifact, and then that you can retrieve it safely and get out of the cave with no deaths. First try, no issues, no problems. And obviously some of the caves, like the insect cave, you may want to use something like a Megatherium, but you'll need to use a mana of cryos, and the fact that this thing is so convenient that you can simply just walk it into the cave and then walk it out, apart from obviously that one ice cave where literally no creature will fit. It is so convenient, and it has a wealth of abilities to help you along the way as well, like its spin ability, which you may have just seen there, which can stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. Definitely a cool ability to have, and definitely a really reliable, insanely great caving creature. Now, there is no doubt that the Giga is built for all of that power, and the fact that this is a really reliable creature on top of that, as you can get the same power every time when using it, is insane. And you may say, what about the Carcharodontosaurus? Isn't that a more reliable, better large carnivore? But the fact is, its taming method is so buggy, and sometimes with its bleed ability, its damage will vary, so you don't know what to expect out of it every single time, and sometimes it can be a really unreliable tame, which the Giga isn't. You know how to tame it, you know what to expect, you know how many resources it will take, and then every time you use the Giga, you know how much damage it will do, and you'll know instantly where its limits are and what it is best used for. And obviously, when you use it, you will know exactly every single time how it will perform and all of that, and you'll have no stress about it. And obviously you can have more, and obviously you can always add more Gigas if you need more power, but I never really need more than one unless I'm facing the Titans on extinction. Then I will definitely use more than one, as one simply isn't enough. And the only thing really to be careful for is their rage meter, as that is the only thing which is slightly unreliable about them, as if they take too much damage, they'll kick you off and simply kill you. So definitely be very careful when using the Giga, obviously. But apart from that, it is the most insane Carno you will see. In at number 3 is the Rex, and there is no doubt that the Rex is by far one of the most reliable carnivores out there. It is such a balanced tame that you always know what to expect out of a Rex, and they are so predictable when it comes to what they can do, what their health is, what their stamina is, what their weight is, and what the Rex's limits are, and that makes them an extremely useful tame. You may think all of that will make a boring tame, but actually it makes an even more useful one, as if you know everything about that creature and what it can do and what it can't do, you can utilize that creature to the fullest. Obviously, the Rex isn't going to do what the Giga or the Carcharodontosaurus can, but it can do a lot, and especially when it comes to bosses, where Gigas and Carcharodontosauruses are not allowed into the boss arenas. And especially on maps like Gen 1, the Giga is great for the Master Controller boss fight, especially with X-Rexes as well, as if you have Gen 1, you should definitely cash into those X-Rexes, as they are an even better version of the normal Rex, just with a little bit of a buffed ability, which is, I think, minus 25% in terms of damage that other creatures will deal, and plus 25% on damage reduction. So it is an extremely useful thing to have, and actually, on second thought, it may just be 125% extra in terms of damage reduction, which is good. Obviously, you get that extra 25%, and it just makes that creature a little bit stronger, and it gives it the extra special edge. But the Rex is definitely a reliable one of which is really easy to tame, and it is a very simple knockout tame. Very easy and simple, and you can't really go wrong with one. In at number 2 is the Desmodus, and you may think, well, why is this creature reliable? Its taming method is actually very buggy at times, but actually I haven't found it to be very buggy in comparison to things like the Carcharodontosaurus. And if you are taming a low level from the start, it is actually a pretty easy tame to get your head around, as it is pretty much a slightly shelled out passive tame. It is just a little bit of a more complex passive tame, you could say. There's better words than what I used previously, and it is actually very simple. When you kind of get down to it, you just feed it blood bags when it picks you up, and then you tame yourself a Desmodus. Pretty simple, and you can also feed it creatures, maybe, I think, to get 100% effectiveness, or that's how you do it on the Bloodstalker. Probably, don't quote me on that one. I've never tamed one of these with 100% effectiveness, as that's not the kind of Ark player I usually am. And once tamed, you got yourself a very reliable flyer, capable of so many things. They're so quick, they're easy to use, and they are an absolute blood bag farm, and they're really reliable for taming as well with that Sanguine Elixir. And in at number 1 is the RG. And what would you expect, really? The RG is just that tame which every single Ark player needs at some point in their journey. And I know pretty much no one, actually, literally no one that has played Ark for a decent amount of time, over 100 hours, that has not use the RG at some point. It is just one of those creatures which has to be used at some point. This thing is great for gathering metal. Obviously it doesn't gather the metal, it just transports you from A to B and then you gather the metal, but it does have weight reduction on resources like metal, crystal and obsidian, and its saddle acts as a little smithy too, which is actually pretty good. I'm not sure how expensive the saddle is overall. It's unlocked in the late 60s I think in terms of level. Don't think level 69 like the Ther, which is a little bit sad. But obviously getting that saddle as early as possible is really what you want to do with the RG, as once you have it, you can level up from your sad Pteranodon which you may have. Not that the Pteranodon is a bad tame and all, but the RG is significantly better as it actually has good stam, it actually has good weight, and no more frustrations when it comes to metal gathering with the Pteranodon will be needed from then on once you have the RG. And obviously it can pick up a wealth of creatures as well, which is extremely useful. And when paired with the Anki, you have an absolute metal farming machine of a creature. And if you're with friends as well, you can pick up some other players too. And don't forget, if you're low on health, just quickly eat a dead corpse and you will get an insane regen buff. Definitely a reliable tame. But anyway, that was the end of today's video, and I want to know from you down in the comments, what are your 10 most reliable Ark Tames to you? And I will see you all later.